What made your ex the crazy ex? When he called the police to tell them I was receiving drugs through the mail slot in my front door, then parked in front of my house after he put drugs through my mail slot. When the police arrived to talk to me, my neighbor told them they had seen him do it and that he was still sitting in his car on the street watching. He was then arrested and charged with possession, distribution, and violating a trespassing and restraining order. I would imagine they could get him for knowingly making a false call. I can't remember what it's called, but there could be another potential charge of intentionally restricting the freedom of another, in the sense that he knowingly tried to get you falsely accused of a crime. On another note, thank goodness for the neighbor. Couldn't his use of a mail slot also make it some kind of felony? USPS don't fucking play. 1 IRS. 2 USPS inspectors. 3 the spooks who blew JFK's head off. 4 Secret Service. 5 old women who teach high school. 6 llamas. 7 law enforcement. 8 kindergarten bullies. 9 chihuahuas. 10 spicy chili. 11 small-town cops. Both the IRS and the Secret Service are parts of the Treasury Department, so overall, I'd say there's a reasonable case to be made that they also killed JFK. The IRS, however, has caved a couple times. When the IRS was denying Scientology a religious tax exemption, Scientologists filed personal lawsuits against IRS agents and the agency in courts across the nation. The agency would go bankrupt defending its personnel and itself. They settled with Scientology. The current IRS, underfunded by both sides of Congress for years, can no longer afford to audit very large taxpayers as the legal hurdles and complexity of the audit are too large for their budget. They can only afford to audit middle and lower class people. The IRS budget is in shambles, as well as pretty much the entire governmental IT infrastructure. You'd think due to the US pretty much inventing tech companies, our government would have unlimited storage capacity for all their archival requirements, but you'd be wrong. There are systems and records that are still backed up on paper archives that are in old mines for climate control. So many leaders prefer their own private email server, in part because the email systems at the State Department are just awful. As an IRS IT employee myself, you hit this well on the head. Underfunding the IRS is bananas to me. They're one of the few government entities that can bring in more money than we spend on them, but instead of paying what they owe, big businesses have thrown money at politicians for favors like defanging the taxman. So this is why my family haven't received tax refund or stimulus money yet. Paper archives that are in old mines for climate control. Yeah, but the mines are why the climate is out of control though? Nah. His head just did that. The Secret Service used to be part of Treasury, but it was transferred to Homeland Security when that department was created. The Secret Service is no longer part of the Treasury Department. It was moved to Homeland Security when that department was created after 9/11. It most likely involved the CIA, not Secret Service. I mean, a known communist defector to the Soviet Union just happens to be working in a building with a decent field of fire at an elevation and who just happens to be killed by a known mafia associate on national television shortly after he announces he was a stooge and the man who killed him dies. Just before his second trial was to take place, where he could have potentially revealed his motivations, connections. I mean, if he had any. Clearly all a conspiracy theory for the loons. Next thing you'll say you think Epstein didn't off himself in his cell after being assaulted by his cellmate, taken off suicide watch, the prison's cameras malfunctioning and the guards skipped their regular patrols with alleged screaming coming from his cell. Russian, CIA, Mafia, Secret Service, federal banks, Oswald, LBJ, the list goes on and it's nonsensical. And if it hasn't been solved by now, then we'll never know what happened. I'm listening to a pretty interesting podcast called Missing in Alaska about two Democratic congressmen whose plane had vanished and anything ever to be recovered. The Louisiana congressman was in the Warren Commission. Lots of weird deaths around that time. Conspiracy theory accepted. The elite guardsmen of the president are part of the section of this country that is supposed to do shit with money. When the Secret Service was created, the Department of the Treasury was the largest federal law enforcement agency at the time, so they had the best ability to do it. They moved under the Department of Homeland Security when that agency was created. The IRS killed JFK was not a take I expected to see today. I think geese have got to be on this list. You don't fuck with geese. Chihuahuas should definitely be higher on the list. The tall, curly-haired guy from grade 10 with the acne. Target's loss prevention team. They have a forensics laboratory that's so good that law enforcement will ask for their help. They've experimented with facial recognition programs, and they have been known to wait to charge shoplifters until they can make a felony case against them. You missed Canadian geese. Damn it. Good one. You just cost me at least 20 minutes of my life. My Chihuahua was offended by being below llama, so I was forced to explain to her at length exactly what would happen if I introduced her to a llama. This was a long debate which ended ugly. She called me a petting zoo whore. I called her a coward. I feel like she struck lower. She wanted to know what IRS meant, but there was no way I was getting into that with her. Plus, she's only half Chihuahua, the dramatic little shit, and even the vet called her a wimp. Never teach a Chihuahua to read. That's first day Chihuahua owner stuff. It would be really cool if there were whores at the petting zoo. I know. She doesn't even know how to roll over. Always prioritize phys ed. What? Racist small-town cops. 2 USPS inspectors. Especially when they hire people like Jack Danger. Who? Add railroad cops and fish and game to number 2. I'd like to plead a case for the Chihuahua. Game wardens are surprisingly high up on that list. Somewhere in there are house cats. 7 and 8 are the same thing. Llamas seriously are no joke. I got trapped in a llama field in high school in the middle of the night. Haha, they wouldn't let me out. Exclamation mark. I feel like we should be higher on the list than number 6. I, for one, am a stone cold killer. CAAARL. This is the worst Christmas ever. Scientology beat the IRS. I'd add DNR offices in there somewhere, even more so since they're apparently fucking wizards. You could be in the middle of the wilderness, 100 miles from the nearest road, and a DNR officer will pop out from behind a squirrel and start asking for your permits. Old women who teach high school. Llamas. Spicy chili. What is this? They do now. After years of severe defunding by Republicans, postal inspectors, like most vital regulatory bodies, are totally hobbled. The modern postal inspectors are like Google support for every Google product other than AdWords. Basically an automated online report form for the millions to use, and then a tiny team does the best they can with what little they have. Yet tampering with someone's mail or mailbox is a felony. As someone else said, USPS doesn't mess around. I don't know, man. Messing with mailboxes seems to be more and more common. People don't seem to fear shit. Then take it into your own hands and make them fear you instead. I did take it into my own hands, but not by instilling fear, since I'm not going to wake up and stalk the neighborhood at 3 to 4 a.m. every day hoping to finally catch the perp and then do something I'll either regret or that escalates to something I can't handle. I just bought a locking mailbox. problem solved, but it does anger me when I leave for work and see a bunch of the normal mailboxes with the front flaps hanging down. Ours are in bunches of a few together. Falsely reporting a crime for malicious purposes is absolutely a federal offense. Knocking over mailboxes is a federal offense. Calling cops and wasting their time while falsifying a drug drop and being caught at the scene of the crime. Bake 'em away, toys. Williams couldn't fuck this up. Not necessarily a felony, but federal crime, IRC. No, it has to actually go through the USPS. The mail slot is distinctly your private property. I doubt it, since it didn't go through the mail and the slot on the door is not USPS property. Probably not. Keep in mind, random companies push things through your mail slot all the time, even if you have a sign saying not to. There's a massive difference between things that come through the mail or even folks that are soliciting and drugs like the crazy guy did. Not sure about mail slots, since they could weasel out by saying they put it under the door, but it's illegal to put anything in a mailbox except USPS mail. That's why Amazon, UPS, FedEx all leave packages on doorsteps, even if they're tiny, and why there are separate boxes for newspapers. That's USPS territory, period. I learned that when distributing flyers for a non-profit I worked for. I put a bunch in mailboxes, and my boss flipped out and made me go get them all back out so we didn't get in trouble. Falsely reporting a crime for malicious purposes is absolutely a federal offense. I replied to the wrong person here. Sorry. I'm pretty sure drug possession is definitely the easiest and biggest charge in the list. Don't worry, that's how you lose visitation rights. Tell your mom I say what's up. I feel like my IQ just dropped a little by reading that comment, lol. I only drop in once every few years. I mean, technically, he did call the police, and the crime did technically occur. Technically a few crimes did occur, however he is the one that committed them. Was referring to the false call comment. Should have specified. Causing false public alarm, falsifying a police report. Those I figured, but I wasn't sure about the restricting the freedom of another. I remember there being a case several years back that one of the offenders was charged with restricting freedom. The irony is that the ones committing the crimes were a married couple who were both lawyers. They planted drugs on a PTA parent that they thought insulted their child, among other things they did in retaliation. I believe it's called misuse of emergency services. Yeah, figured those. However, I've heard of a couple of cases where there is an additional charge of restricting the freedom of another. I just don't know what that looks like in the different court systems. There's also malicious prosecution, which is a common law thing. Well, technically they really were receiving drugs through their front door. Yeah, but I bet if that's how she gets her mail that a prosecutor could add in something to do with the mail. At the very least, the prosecutor could use it to convince their guy to take a plea deal. Wasn't really a false call though, was it? Someone clearly did put drugs in her mail slot. Stupid lie enough it was him, but he didn't lie. It still is a call made under false pretenses. I imagine in the call he made it sound like she was the one buying drugs, which he knew was a lie.